Our next speaker is, we're going out of order here, but it's Juilien Wagner. She is a faculty member and researcher at Iowa State University's College of Design. Her teaching and research focuses on river and riparian restoration, as well as water quality. She currently teaches in a new ISU graduate program, Design and Sustainable Environments.
There it is. It's great to be here with you this afternoon, and I'm thankful to not be the last person before happy hour, which is, I think, what I was slated to be before Don pleaded with me to switch, because he wanted to be the last person. So for the past year, I have been working on this research project. Oh, good. I have been working on this research project for the Iowa Department of Natural Resources. They are the river programs, water trails program within river programs is the client. And what I'm going to show you are the beginnings of overview findings of the past year. And I want to talk just a bit about what the goal of their interests are in terms of hiring me and my staff to contemplate 12 rivers in Iowa, or segments of 12 rivers in Iowa. First of all, there is established in the state a state water trails program. So there are routes that are designated as state water trails. That is expanding as funding continues to grow and stabilize from the state budget. And with that, all along in the water trail program, they've had a really strong interest, different from other states, in that they're really focused on restoration and conservation, not just recreation in those water trails. And so my work is helping them to shape the program that they want to have, to be able to designate certain segments of certain rivers that provide benefits, both to people who might visit them and use them on land or on the water, and as well to help target restoration and conservation dollars. So the work that you're going to see today, we were trying to help them identify along a pretty large set of metrics, what are some of the strongest elements of each river. In the abstract, I talked about helping to create an identity for each river. We're not quite there yet this afternoon at 3:55. Tomorrow afternoon at 3:55 we might have been, but no, that was just a joke. But what we're trying to do is try to say, from a protection and a restoration standpoint, what are maybe some of the best investments? Also, helping to feed local advocacy, because in each of the study areas I'm going to show you, there is a local crew on the ground who's working on this project, who's very interested in the possibility of having a state designated water trail in their county. And they have different interests in terms of conservation, restoration, and recreation. So we're also trying to provide data for them to help them to determine what they want to pursue in terms of natural resource protection goals. So these are the 12 rivers, and I'm going to run through them, and then we're going to have a quiz at happy hour later. So we have the Big Sioux River, and oh good, Big Sioux is up here, and the counties that are dark are the segments of the river that we're studying. So there's 4 counties. We've got the Little Sioux, which is actually broken into 2 study segments, Cherokee and Woodbury in one, whatever counties those are into the other 2. That's actually Dickinson, Clay, Buena Vista, and O'Brien. We have Black Hawk Creek over here, the smallest river and watershed of all the ones being studied, which is a tributary to the Cedar. And these 2 counties of the Cedar are where we're working. We've got the Lower Des Moines down here in primarily in Van Buren County, a little tiny bit of Wapello County. We've got the Iowa in Johnson and Louisa counties, or Johnson from Iowa City downstream, I should say. And the Upper Iowa, of course, what Iowa study is remiss, that misses the Upper Iowa is missing something large. So we have 2 counties there. We have the South Skunk in Story County, where I live, and we have the Maquoketa in Delaware. And the other one that I forgot to mention was the West Nishnabotna in Pottawatomie County. So we are in nearly every ecoregion. And this is the same segments. It's a little tougher to see, but these are the drainage, the Huck 8 or 10s that drain into those. And so most of the research that we've been doing is by compiling, collaborating with other researchers to obtain data that they may have, creating our own data. And in most cases, we're working right in the riparian corridor of the study counties. In some cases, we're working watershed wide, and you'll start to see some of those differences. Because obviously, these hucks that are illustrated are draining to the segments we're studying. So they're not the stuff that's going out and around and entering downstream of the segments that we're interested in. So a couple of the data layers that I want to talk about that we're going to see referenced. And one is the National Cropland Data Layer. We're using 2013 data for this particular set of slides that I'm showing you today. We're also including the Office of State Archaeologist Phase 1A Archaeologic Survey data. We developed data layers that compiled all areas of permanent protection in the study area counties, and that includes primarily land that's right on the river. So permanent protection could include public ownership. It also could include a permanent easement. And we realize that we don't have all of the easements. We're not able to calculate all of those because we weren't able to get complete access to all the organizations' data that own those easements. But we have a number of them. And then we're also using Breeding Bird Atlas 2 data in Iowa. These are blocks that were surveyed sometime between 2008 and 2012. And the blocks that we included in our study were right on the river that we were studying. So we have actual breeding bird species that have been identified by trained professionals. So let's go ahead and get started. These are the main types of analysis that I'm going to show you some quick results from today, and we'll just run through them. And at the end, then I'll talk a bit about where this is going and what it's starting to suggest. So the first thing I want to talk about are areas or particular study areas that are showing promise for breeding bird protection of habitat. So these are places where, and I should say with the National Cropland Data Layer, we did a buffer analysis from 2013 for 100 feet on either side of the stream, top of bank, back. And you're going to see those results peppered into all this analysis. And in this particular one, we wanted less than 1 acre of annually cultivated land per mile of the study, the river mile, averaged out. So not very much. We wanted multiple important bird areas and bird conservation areas to intersect with the river. Each one of these segments has at least more than 20 species of greatest conservation need in terms of birds. They have at least one threatened or endangered species breeding there as well. And lastly, there's more than 130 acres of permanently protected land per river mile attached to the river. So it's not all riparian, but it's all attached to the river. And so you're seeing the 3 that are the darkest in red, they are the ones that were the strongest in terms of providing. And so again, this map is a little deceiving because we're really only focused on the counties, but the whole entire watershed is shaded from an illustration purpose. Next, I want to talk about aquatic habitat. And this is a little tricky when you're not out in the field, but we did have obviously access to quite a bit of data, and it continues to trickle in. But what you're going to see here is relatively strong IBI scores, both for fish and benthic macroinvertebrates. You're also going to see places where the things that are highlighted are places where greater than 15 species of mussels, were identified in the last year and a half in the study segment, and also greater than 30 species of fish. So we are seeing the Little Sioux, the northern upstream area is stronger than the downstream area, the cedar and the macocata. Next, I want to talk about this idea of permanent protected land and also terrestrial habitat. So in these areas, what we're finding, and sometimes in this particular one, each one of these didn't have every one of these elements, but most of them, they have most of them. So we're going to see at least 80% of the 100-foot buffer is perennial cover, not crops. And with all the really due, what's the word? Attention that's being paid to what the buffers are composed of in terms of land cover, I was really proud to see that so much of the streams that we're studying, and these were not randomly selected rivers. These are rivers that local paddlers and someone local brought forward as a potential water trail candidate. So they're not the average Iowa stream. But for all of these to have greater than 80% perennial cover in the 100-foot buffer on either side is really something great to see. We want to see less than 2% of a developed or impervious cover in that 100-foot buffer. And we want to see at least 6% of the edge of the river on both sides in permanent protection. We also want to see at least 76 acres of permanently protected land per river mile. And we want to have special bird designations in terms of the geographic boundaries. And then, yeah, and that's it. So we end up with 4 candidates in this particular case. And so what you're seeing is pretty massive. Up in the Big Sioux, there is public land. There's also a great deal of easement land, EWRP, WRP, from past floods. Down here in the lower Des Moines River, what we call the lower Des Moines Water Trail area, there is a Shimmick State Forest, and there's another large public property down there. What is it? Stevens? Is that right? Okay, yep. And those bumped up those numbers quite a bit as well. And so, yeah, pretty exciting. This next one is, okay, so this is data that I have obtained from the agronomy department at ISU. I'm curious if you've heard of the Iowa Daily Erosion Project. Please raise your hand. Great. So now at the end of this, you can all raise your hand. This is a wonderful project. I think it's been up and running for about, they've been kind of playing with this for, I think, about 5 years. And it's run by Rick Cruz and Brian Gelder primarily, but they're also working with folks from ARS, somebody from University of Iowa, somebody from Colorado State, and the National Soil Erosion Laboratory. And what their goal is, this was an endowment that came into their department. What they have, and if you just make a note, if you're interested in this, and in fact, even if you're not, I want you to make a note of this and look it up. Just search for Iowa Daily Erosion Project. And it takes you to a website, and you can put in any day of any year, or I think even a month, or now maybe an entire calendar year. And you can see, based on what rainfall actually occurred, and the LIDAR, and the soils, and the land cover, and the residue, which has been remotely sensed, what the estimate of actual soil erosion is on any HUC 12 in the state of Iowa, which is pretty amazing, okay? So this is not delivery to the stream channel. This is not even delivery to gullies in this that feed the stream channel. This is erosion coming from the upland down to the point where it begins to form ephemeral gullies. And so this is future erosion reaching the river. And what it does is give us this amazing sense this is from 2012 for the whole state. You can only see the HUC 12s when you can see a color change. And then you can see our study areas that bisect those bolder blue lines. So what we're seeing is not cumulative, it's based on a HUC 12. So you can compare one HUC 12 to another HUC 12. And why might I have picked 2012 to show you today? Who can guess? What happened in 2012 weather-wise? was a drought, right? So the darker the red, the more erosion. And these, you can choose the output that you desire. The standard is kilograms per meter squared, but tons per acre is also, you can also get that as well. So this is for an entire year, for the entire state. You can do, as I said, on a daily basis, you can go in and see after a particular storm exactly where that storm tracked through and what that, so it's combining all of that into one model. It's really exciting. And some of the goals that they have are they're fine tuning it, they're making it incredibly, from a data standpoint, really respected and able to meet the needs of what they think farmers particularly need to know and resource managers. And then the plan is to extend it out beyond Iowa to 5 states surrounding. And they're also developing mobile apps that farmers could use or anyone else could use out in the field as well. So here are 2 of my study areas, our study areas. And I showed you these 2 because, well, the Little Sioux is not as large as the Cedar River. But what you can see in the Little Sioux, this is the breakpoint between upper and lower, is a massive difference. Of course, we're changing landscape, or changing ecoregion here. The landscape is really changing, but a huge amount of erosion on its way to the stream here in much greater proportion than the upper part. And down here in the Cedar, which is a much larger river, a much larger watershed, a considerably less erosion that's reaching. So this has to, when erosion is estimated through a model like this, it's not only a matter of how much rain they got and what the intensity was, but it's also the land cover, it's also the residue and the slope. So there's a lot of factors, some of which we have control over as owners and managers of that land, and obviously some that we don't. But a really interesting thing to add into our data set. So here's the worst 3 from our study areas. This is average erosion by Huck for the entire year. And you've got West Nish, Lower Little Sioux, Big Sioux. The best 3, the South Skunk and West Fork of the Des Moines and Black Hawk Creek, which is that tiny little, Black Hawk is that tiny little trib that goes into the Cedar. So now this is a little trickier one, but what we wanted to do is to try to explain or to try to suggest if one wanted to kayak or canoe a segment of river and wanted it to be the most natural kind of channel, not saying stable, not saying highly functional or highly diverse biologically, but the most natural condition, as close as pre-settlement as possible, with the exception of a lot of things. These are the things that we would, these are the places you would go. And here's what they give you. They give you a sinuosity of at least 1.3. They give you at least a greater than 23% perennial land cover in the entire Huck, not just the riparian corridor. The channel length in the last 30 years has changed no more than 1%. It's gotten no more than 1% longer. In some cases, we have some rivers that were 4% shorter or 7% longer in 30 years. And what I see when I see that is a really actively laterally migrating stream that, well, it's changing. And so probably you're going to see a lot of cut banks. And we're trying to avoid that. Each of these have greater than 41% wetlands in the first 100-foot buffer on either side, and at least 76 acres of permanently protected land in each river mile on average. So that leaves us with the Iowa, which is an amazing, an amazing river here down in Louisa and Johnson County. We've got the West Fork of the Des Moines, and we've got the Big Sioux. And I've never been on the Big Sioux and kind of turned my nose up at that one when it showed up on the list to study, but between everything I've seen, it's pretty impressive. And I definitely recommend getting out to see it. So now we want to talk about economic spending, and I did talk about, in my abstract, I mentioned economics. So we used the 2009 CARD data, the ISU CARD, and we took the spending that they extrapolated statewide that is occurring on just by people who use the river recreationally. And that doesn't mean only fishing or boating. That means anyone who took a trip to the river. It could have been to picnic or to hike or to relax or one of the other 14 categories that they asked people about. But then based on the time and that they spent there and how many people were in their party, they attributed a certain dollar amount of spending. And so what you see here are the top 5 in terms of economic impact locally. And these are just on the segments that we're studying. They're not the entire basin. And it's not always just the biggest rivers, but these tend to be the bigger rivers that we're studying. And that makes some sense when you think about it. Okay, this next one is really interesting. And this is data that comes from the OSA, Office of State Archaeologists. And for this one, what we looked at were how many quarter sections. Well, first of all, let me tell you that OSA's study boundaries, the ones we gave them, are bluff top to bluff top on either side of the river. And so only the data that I'm going to tell you about is only within these counties that we studied and in that particular bluff top to bluff top. And so we're talking about quarter sections where at least one archaeologic site has been documented. And not that they can be visited or that they're even known or that they're even ever described and released to the public. But what this signifies is that there's resources present that we know about and they can be interpreted. Not the exact place or the exact thing that happened that's known, but the story behind that. And this is a huge draw for people. And a way Iowa DNR River Program staff sees as bringing new people to water trails to understand their value, to invest in this resource. So each one of these rivers, the study areas just in our counties, they have at least 55 quarter sections that have at least one archaeologic site known. And each one of them has more than 34 buildings that are on the National Register of Historic Places that are also open to the public. So not houses that are private, but public buildings. So that's pretty amazing. And what this does is offer someone who may be paddling with a family, that not everyone in the family wants to be on the water, and if they are interested in history, a way to loop around and do a lot of other things in terms of the National Register sites. In terms of the quarter sections, it tells us that there's a very rich history and a great deal known about the history that has already happened there. So I think this is the very last one that I'm going to show you, is a scenario where we tried to say at present with existing access information, and they've all been inventoried and measured and assessed for condition and function. Where are the best places currently, or that would be the easiest to modify for beginning paddlers? And the only thing not included in this that's really valuable is where people might be, right? Right? Which is really important, but that piece can be added in later. So what these places, these two particular rivers segments give us are at least 5 accesses with low slope launches, and that's a big problem in Iowa. Often they're steep, often they have steps. And we have at least 5 or more accesses that are in developed parks or communities, which make people a lot more comfortable. We have at least 4 in each one that have restrooms. We have at least 4 segments that are 6 miles or less, which is awesome for a beginning paddler. And we have existing interpretation of natural features there. None of these, there are no segments that are impaired for bacteria in these 2 rivers. And we have less than 6% annually cultivated cropland in the 100-foot buffer on either side. And again, 34 or more sites on the National Register for Historic Places. So these offer a great place to start thinking about where to do gateway types of experience water trails. So this slide shows you where we've got some issues on the ground socially. The 2 counties that are shown in red, they're part of study areas, but the local watershed, with some help and organization, boycotted the water trail, the study, even being studied to be designated. So DNR consented to promise not to designate a water trail there. But there's not only a lack of support, but there's opposition to that. The counties in green are places where there isn't local, I'm trying to think of the word, there's not a capacity locally yet to manage or to sponsor a state designated water trail. So for the time being, all of these places are off the table. I also want to talk about what this kind of sorting and analysis doesn't show you. The West Niche is the very first project area that we looked at. It's already state designated. And what you don't see is it topping out on anything other than it's, I think, 8 miles longer than it was 30 years ago, which is crazy in one county. And I think it's 7 miles, actually. But what you don't see from those numbers is that the Mormon Trail crossed the West Nishnabotna right on this water trail in this amazing little town called Macedonia that hardly anyone knows about and most people have forgotten about in Potawatomi County. And they offer this amazing possibility for interpretation and to be part of already a national movement of people coming through those areas, coming through this route. The last one I want to put a call out on is my home river these days, the South Skunk. And this is the only river of the 12 we're studying that has any kind of zoning protection on the river. The northern part of the county from Ames, from the northern edge of Ames up to the county line is included in it's what's called the Skunk River Greenbelt. It's a leftover from the days in which a reservoir was planned by the Corps of Engineers for flood control above Ames. Reservoir was opposed locally and stopped, but a lot of the land had already been purchased, and much of it now as one of the payoffs for walking away from the reservoir, the Corps insisted that it be put in some kind of protection so that it could never be developed. And it doesn't prohibit a lot of any kind of low impact use, including agriculture, but it does prohibit structures and other types of filling and excavation in that area. So with that, that's my last slide and I'm out of time, but I'm curious what you think, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, particularly related to how one helps shape a state program. If it was your program, that you were trying to shape, what kinds of things that we didn't include today in today's presentation would you have thought to be interesting given our interest in restoration and conservation? And with that, I'll take questions.
We've got time for maybe 1 or 2 questions while Don switches it over. Go ahead, Ann.
Yeah, what is next steps for this project?
Good, thanks, good question. We've just contracted for the next phase of work, and a handful of these rivers are moving forward into on-the-ground research and analysis, and also master planning for water trail development in that entire corridor. So not only are we looking at water infrastructure improvements like better accesses that allow more diverse people to use them, but also fishing accesses, also whatever the priorities that have been identified in our early planning, such as there's an equestrian trail planned for one of them. Those kinds of things will all be worked out, and more coalition building in each river corridor that will support the goals that they have locally in terms of restoration and conservation. Thanks for asking that.
Okay. That's all we have time for. If you want to ask me any more questions,
I'll be there afterwards.
see you afterwards.
Thanks, John.
Yep.